I previously showed you how to run I previously showed you how to run I previously showed you how to add SNES games to the SNES Classic using earlier revisions of clusters commit codes. I want to show you exactly how much he has made progress-wise in the whole process. And now we're at a pinnacle where everything's just running quite awesome and everything's automated now. It's nearing much closer to completion than we saw a few days ago. I mean, he really put in some overdrive on this. Anyways, I'm going to give you a brief overview of Hakchi for those of you who are unfamiliar with this. You're obviously going to want to have your SNES Classic with the micro USB cable that came with it plugged directly into a USB port on your computer. The first thing you're going to want to do once you plug it in is you're going to want to dump the kernel. You're not going to be able to do anything until you dump the kernel. So you're going to dump the kernel. It's telling me I already dumped it, so I'm not going to have to do it, but I'm going to show you the process. It's basically going to go into a folder called dump. That's where it's kept at. And I would suggest you just make like a backup folder right in the Hakchi directory for anything important. So we're going to back up that dump folder. It's very crucial you back up stuff that could otherwise be important later. So we have that taken care of. And after you dump the kernel, you're going to have to flash the custom kernel. And basically, you're not going to be able to run any games or RetroArch or anything until you flash the custom kernel. When I go to click yes on the custom kernel, and this will also allow the drivers to install so you can flash games. And some of you who have used NES Classics last year will remember the slow process of flashing games that could take up to 20 minutes to 30 minutes at a time, because we had to flash 30 megabytes at a time and keep doing this process over and over again. Basically, it has these steps on here, and roughly you're going to just take the power and the reset button on the SNES Classic, and you're going to just push them both away from you at the same time, and then you'll wait about 3 to 4 seconds until it goes into the next process. Now, kernels are not always going to match. If you have a kernel that was on somebody else's SNES Classic, you'll get an MD5 hash checksum error, but they're pretty compatible all across the board. We never had a problem with the NES Classic, and I highly doubt we'll ever have a problem with the SNES Classic as well. But I'm flashing a custom kernel. Then I'm going to show you a few more things. I mean, so as of right now, the first thing you need to do is dump the kernel. Then you're going to flash the custom kernel. And here's that MD5 checksum right there. We're going to click continue. If you're wondering where the custom kernel goes, it goes right into this temp folder. And then, of course, there's temporary internet files as well. I've made a YouTube video about this, and you can search under my profile, Access Denied. Several people soft-break their systems because Hakchi, pretty much with the Clover Shell inclusion, is basically false positive as a virus by firewalls, virus protection, etc. And the flashing process would have been interrupted, and you'd lose the ability to flash on the system again. But if you watch my Access Denied video, it'll help you fix that issue if you do get it with the SNES Classic. So we're letting this flash. Everything's good so far. Then I'm going to go over a few of the other features on here that are pretty cool. Roughly, when you flash the custom kernel, if you actually went inside it, right now it's doing a kernel and such, but if you were flashing games, they would show up in there along with the art. And we're also going to go over how much memory you truly have on the SNES Classic. Because on the NES Classic, once everything was said and done, you pretty much had about 337 megabytes of working space to truly do stuff with. I mean, for games and all that. You ran out of space pretty quick after that. Again, I go over that in some of my videos as well. So we're about done with the custom kernel, and we'll have the drivers installed so we could flash the games. And these pretty much copy over just like copying files directly, like a file transfer. It's pretty nice. Okay. You have this nifty little option where you go into settings, pages folder structure. You can do disable and you'll get your game showing up in the main GUI only. I usually do custom folder manager every time. And by having this enabled, if you go to sync games, it's going to go right to that before syncing the games. So we're going to do that on purpose. And I made folders here. And you can add icons to them. I like to keep my unsorted folder, because any games I want to play immediately, it always redirects right to that folder when you quit to the main GUI. I even made an icon for it. And these need to be in ping format. And they're located in your folder images. And you have this one folder back here. You can replace that with about any ping you want. I have the Mario 64 door there, and it looks awesome when you're using it on the system, as you saw in my previous video. So that's what I have for that. So I have my arcade games, my Game Boy Color games, NES, Genesis, Sega CD, and SNES. I can click cancel right now and then choose to save my folder structure. So that's all good and done. Now I'm going to add an SNES game here. And I'm going to go into my settings. I'm going to make sure compressed games when add-in is enabled. And I have both my games and my art in the same folder. It'll make it easy to select both. So I'm going to add just Biometal. And then I'm going to add the artwork for it right afterwards. So Biometal. And it's pretty automated now compared to what I showed you in my previous video. It's doing the proper command lines right down the line to run with the Canoe emulator. So I could just prefix this like I did before. So I know it's the SNES Classic. And I have the title the way I want it with a semicolon. Then I'm just going to go right into the same folder, and it'll be nice and easy to add the art for the same game. So I added Biometal, and that's listed. I'm going to add another game. Let's pick some other random game here. How about Three Ninjas Kickback? Why not? I don't think I've ever played that game. So I'm going to add the zip for that. And it's doing a conversion right to the SFROM, and it's actually compressing it as well. I'm going to go into this command line here. So it was a zip with an SFC in it. Now it's an SFROM, and it's 7-zipped. You could also G-zip these. It has the save state perimeters on there along with the volume. Of course, you could change the snapshot period to be a longer period of time. You could make it... I made it one where I pretty much save and I have no chance to rewind at all, and I made it like 3600 where I have like a good 45 seconds or more. I mean, you could change it to whatever you want for the most part. Just keep in mind, save states tend to take up about 2 megabytes each, if not more. So we got Three Ninjas Kickback. I'm going to do my prefix one more time. And this saves to the desktop file. I mean, before I had to do it manually, but now it's automated, which is beautiful. So I'm going to add the Three Ninjas Kickback art. Now we're going to go in the folder manager. I'm just going to leave these games as is. And one thing I got to point out here, when you add certain games, like say I added my Sega CD game, where it says bin here, whatever format you added in is going to show up right here. But you don't want that always to stick there. Obviously with NES that's fine, but with Sega CD, it would show up in, say, like an ISO format or whatever other format I do. You're going to have to change it to what it calls for. And I'm going to go into my modules here. I can install extra and uninstall extra modules here. And I have to do a brief overview of this as well, based on my RetroArch video I just did. I'm going back into this folder here. And you copy all of them into your user mods folder. These are what are going to show up. So I have right now, I have Genesis plus GX. Then I have the BIOS for Genesis on there. MAME 2003, which is the arcade games. Then I have MGBA, and I can play Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance. Then I have cheats for the NES, which I showed you in my previous video. Then I have RetroArch, which has 2 NES emulators in there, and that can get a little complicated. And I'll get more into detail about that, or you can watch some of my other videos and see how that works as well. Then I have a backup emulator here, and I'm running Pilot Wings with that. But anyways, you have to have RetroArch installed, and I designated 2 different RetroArchs because one will work on the NES Classic, and one will work on the SNES Classic. If you install the wrong one, you're not going to get the proper point into the desktop files and being able to run games from the main GUI. You're pretty much going to try to click a game and it's just going to kick you right back over and over again. But we're going to go to the Genesis thing, and I'm going to look at what the command line should be for Sega CD here. It says bin Sega CD. That's how I set it up. You could technically use any of these command lines, but I like to at least make it something that matches the game. So it's going to be Sega CD here. And I could do a whole hour video on command line, so a lot of this I'll just help you guys out as you ask questions. So I have this set up the way I want. I have all the art I want. Command lines are good to go. I added a few SNES games. And we're going to just sync games with the SNES Mini. Oh, the other thing I was going to show you real quick, and I'll do it right after I flash these games. I'm clicking OK here. I definitely want to show you guys how much memory is truly on the system. We'll be able to get a good read for that too. The other thing I was going to show you though is the distinction between the 2 different modules you can install for RetroArch. I designated these RetroArch Standard. I did one for the NES Classic and one for the SNES Classic. So you'd want to install the one for NES Classic or the one for SNES Classic, then pretty much every other one of these cores is going to work in conjunction with the one you install for that system. The only one you do not want to install, you're going to get C8 errors if you even attempt to run games after installing this, is the CRT hack. You want to not even mess with that unless you're on the NES Classic, and it works fantastic on the NES Classic. But just leave that alone for now when you're doing the SNES Classic modifications. Everything else works great as far as my testing has been concerned. So we also have a save state manager, and we're going to come back to that after we make a save state, and I'm going to show you how that works. But as of right now, we're going to turn on the system and see what transpired with the flashing process. Make sure everything went over intact. So I have my folders as I wanted them. And I have my back icon as I wanted it. We'll try loading a Sega CD game just to make sure that RetroArch and the BIOS and the Genesis plus GX core are all installed. And I'll run Space Ace demo for the hell of it. It would kick right back to the main GUI if I did not have RetroArch and these cores installed properly. And I should be able to make a save state for this. I mean, the main thing is you want to at least get into the game enough to be able to make a save state. I think I skipped right past the demo. We're going to try Dragon's Lair instead. I pushed start at the wrong, inopportune moment there. So I'm going to intentionally make a few save states just so we can see how much space they take up.
Dragon's Lair.
And I'm still sucking at this. Okay, we're going to quit to the main GUI. And I'm going to make a save state. So we got one save state there. Now we're going to try making a save state for a Super Nintendo game. It really doesn't matter what game we make a save state for. And this is an awesome Mega Man game. Okay, I should be in far enough to be able to do a save state, so I'm going to exit. Okay, now that I have a couple save states, I'm going to go on to the system, the computer again, and I'm going to see how big these save states are. I'm going to switch over to the computer. And you typically have to have the SNES Classic or the NES Classic in the power position so Clover Shell can read the save states. I'm going to go to my tools. Save State Manager. And these aren't taking up too much space right now. So I have a Dragon's Lair demo taking up that space, Cliffhanger taking up that, blah, blah, blah. There's two ways you can remove these. You could remove them right here if you want to. But you could also go into the SNES Classic itself, which I'm going to do. Because what I want to do is clear the entire memory of the system so that we can see how much memory is really on the system. I'm going to power back to the system and show you how you can clear all the save states out without being tethered to a computer. It'd make a few people worry because they think they're actually deleting stuff in a process, but it's a completely safe technique and I've used it multiple times. You want to go up to the options, reset the factory settings. It does not remove your games. It does not remove your folder settings. All it does is delete every single save state that you put on the system, whether or not they're SRAM or the manual save states that you quit to the main GUI. So I'm basically clearing all the memory I can right now, just to see how much memory this SNES Classic truly has. And this is going to involve uninstalling all my RetroArch cords as well. So when I pull up Save State Manager again, I shouldn't have anything show up at all. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the computer. As I said, it's going to be a lot to take in, but it's really not that complicated. I mean, playing around, you'll get a lot of them. Like, you just go in settings, you can actually do controller hacks and use a button combination to reset, and then you can choose it. This is, if you have a controller that doesn't have a home button, you can program it to go home. You can choose your console type. Once you choose the console type, that's what's going to show up for the command lines. You can even go to an FTP and see all the files on the computer. I mean, on the NES Classic or the SNES Classic. And you could search my profile for FTP videos. It works the exact same way on the SNES Classic. This is how I got games on here to begin with a few days ago. Anyways, we're going to go to modules. We're going to uninstall all of these. And again, they're not going to show up in this list unless you have the system on. And it's on long enough to pull up the Clover Shell, which is the direct connection between the computer and the NES Classic or the SNES Classic. So we're going to remove all of these. And we're just going to run the default Canoe emulator and see how much space we truly have on the system. So I'm going to do the away with both power and reset. And typically, after you're done doing the power and reset, you can just leave it on. It'll still retain the red light, and you can flash games right to it. But in this case, I'm only going to flash a couple games and see how much memory I have. Because it's telling me I have 227.5 total megabyte memory. That's because I have these cores installed. But we're removing all the cores right now. We're going to try to regain some space here. I haven't tested this out yet, but you're going to see it right now. But I believe that there's probably a 60 megabyte difference between the NES Classic and the SNES Classic. And don't quote me on that as a fact. That's just my opinion right now until I finalize this test. That'd be because the 30 games that are on the NES Classic take up about 20 megabytes along with the art. And on here, the 21 games along with the art take up 82 megabytes or so. So that's a good 60 megabyte difference that should be affecting your flash memory. And I believe the NAND flash memory chip is pretty much the same in this case. So we're gonna unselect everything here. There's usually an unselect all thing, but I'm not seeing it right now. Now I'm going to exit to try to get a true read on here. Right now it's saying 258.2 megabytes. I'm going to open it up again. That's definitely about a 60 megabyte difference between the NES Classic right there. I shouldn't have any save states at all. They're all gone. I shouldn't have any modules installed. Right there it's showing all of them because it's not connected to Clover Shell, but once it does that second ding, I should be able to see what's truly installed on there. There's my second ding. Now I'm going to go into modules uninstall. I do not have any modules installed on there. So basically, it's letting me have 258.2 megabytes of things here. And on the NES Classic, it's automatically set to 300. So we're losing space here because of these 21 games. And you do not want to delete these games. They get protected, overmounted to a different directory so that they're protected and you can flash back to them if you need to. So you do flash less on the SNES Classic than you do on the NES Classic. And I'm looking right here, which is the debug version. And I love the debug version because it has the command prompt window that you can see all of the things that are going on as you flash. It's telling me I have 22.3 megabytes in games. I have 0 in save states. Available for games 268.2 megabytes.